Welcome back to a new video. So today we're going to be framing the walls for our 8x8 shed. I've decided to make this a lean-to roof. So the front wall, I'm using full 8-foot 2x4s with a single floor plate and a double top plate, which is going to give me an 8-foot 4.5-inch wall. And on the other side, I'm going to make it a 6-foot wall, which will give me in between a 3 and 4/12 pitch. So I'm going to show you how I put this wall together on 16-inch centers, starting with how I put my corners together. I'll be right back with that. Okay, so here's how I lay the corners out. Take a scrap piece of wood. This is about a foot long. Put it at the bottom of your wall. Put about the same size piece in the middle and about the same size piece at the top. And you're going to nail these one angle this way with a 16, one angle this way with a 16 on all three of these. And then we're going to put a 2x4 on top of this and nail it the same way, and that's going to build our corners. I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Okay, here's a tip. If you're having a hard time keeping your lumber steady while you're trying to nail it, use a clamp. These things are cheap. Go to Harbor Freight and get a bunch of them. You will really thank yourself. They're like having strong extra sets of hands. So just clamp it, and then you can put your nails in. Now that you've got all three spacers nailed on your first 8-foot stud, take another 8-foot stud and place it on top. And you're going to nail this into place even with the top of the other stud, exactly like you did the spacers, at an angle on all three pieces. Don't nail your 16s in straight. All right, this should show the angle of what I'm talking about. So this is going to be nailed together. Two 8-foot 2x4s with about 12-inch spacers in between three of them. And that's what makes up your first corner board. So once you've got everything clamped together and your nails started, you just drive them on in. And just do that on both corners. Build them out exactly like I've done this way. Now we're ready to start putting our first wall together. Get two 8-foot studs and lay them out next to each other. You can clamp them at the end if you'd like. And mark at 16. And when you mark these, just put a mark all the way through and mark center. That way you know that's the center of where your stud's going to go. So once your top plate and your bottom plate are clamped together, mark it 16, 32, 48, 64, and 80. And as you can see, I've got it clamped together to make sure that my top and bottom plates stay lined up. You want to keep these marks lined up because this is what's going to make your wall good and square. Once you've got both of your corners nailed, and I use 2 nails in each stud and 1 in that spacer that we put in, so 5 nails total in each corner, making sure everything's nice and flush. Then you can go on to placing your studs in place right on that center mark and drive 2 nails into each one all the way down the line. All right, now you should have all of your studs nailed to the plate, and make sure everything is in line too. All right, now's a good time to mention, you should always, if you're new to framing or building at all, make sure that you go through the lumber. Don't just pick whatever they've got on top. Lumber is not lumber. So pick out the best, straightest lumber you can. It's going to make your building a lot better, whatever you're building, and it's going to make your life a lot better. So now that you've got one side of the wall plate nailed together, just do the same thing to the other side. Now that you've got your wall nailed together and you're ready to stand it up, just make sure that it is square beforehand. You can put a piece of OSB on it And that's what I'm going to do to mine. Okay, now that you've got your wall ready to stand up, put a couple of stops on the edge where you're lifting it. This is if you're by yourself. Put a couple of stops on the edge, use screws, and what this is going to allow to do, you're going to be able to stand this wall up by yourself without it falling over the side. Okay, once you've got your first wall stood up and you've plumbed it, which I've done here with this 2x4, just put a screw in each side. That way when I'm ready to take it off, I can just easily take it off. And now we've got a nice straight wall ready for our shed. Next, I'm going to build this short wall over here after I take a little break. All right, now that we've got our first wall built, this one is built with 8-foot studs and 3 plates, making it 8 foot 4.5 inches. I'll have a double top plate when we're finished. The next wall is going to be 6 feet right around, so I'm going to cut the studs all 4.5 inches minus 6 feet, because I want the finished height to be about 6 feet with a bottom plate and 2 top plates. So that's 4.5 inches I need to remove. So I'm going to get started cutting those now. Okay, now I've got my second wall ready. I cut all my studs at 58 inches, and there's a total of 5 in the center wall and 4 for the outside corners. So you're going to cut 9 total 2x4s at 58 inches and use 2 8-foot lengths for the top and bottom plate. Mark 16-inch centers on each top and bottom plate, keeping them together just like you did on this wall. That way when you separate them, the center marks will all line up and you won't have anything that's out of square. So now I'm going to nail this together and I'll show you what that looks like in a few minutes. All right, so now you should have your 8-foot wall framed and your 6-foot wall framed. This end wall is not where my door is going to go. My door is going to go over here. So this wall is going to get built first and we're going to piece it together. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut a floor plate. Okay, once you've got your floor plate cut, just put it to the bottom and nail it either flush or 7/16 of an inch back to give the sheeting something to rest on. Now, how you do this is up to you, because you can go all the way down to the frame, to the bottom with the OSB, or you can set the floor plate back 7/16 of an inch and let the OSB set on basically the edge of the floor. Whichever way you want to do it, people do it both ways. I should also mention at this point, all 4 outside corners of the walls should be plumb and square at this point. Before you go any further, make sure these are plumb and square. Okay, so once you've got your floor plate nailed in place, you've got your walls plumbed, it's time to put your top plate from your tall wall to your short wall. So what we want to do is we want to basically nail a 2x4 from the top of the stud, not the plate, but from the top of the stud all the way down to the floor plate. Do that on both walls. All right, so when you've got the top plate of your back wall cut, you may notice you're going to have to put about a 22-degree angle on the short wall and about the same up top. And I also, as you can see, I cut this little bird mouth out and allows it to drop right in place on the stud and flush out perfectly with the top plates on both walls. All right, so now I've got the second piece of OSB on my tall wall and I've got this end wall framed. I'm gonna put my 4-foot section of OSB on these 2 walls, and then I'm going to start framing my wall with the door. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my upper sheet of OSB on my back wall, and then the finishing piece of OSB on the 6-foot wall. If you're putting sheathing on by yourself and you get to the upper sections of the walls, the way I do this, I screw a couple of 2x4 scraps onto the OSB at the lower section, like I've done here, and it creates a ledge for this piece to go on. So I'm going to lift it up now and show you the way I do it by myself. All right, there it is there. So pull the OSB tight against the wall. After you know it's in place good, and just scribe along the plate. This is going to give you an exact fit. No guesswork. All right, now basically just cut out that line and you've got a perfectly fit scribed piece for your wall. There you go. Looking great. And now just fasten this the same way you fasten all the rest, about 6 inches in the field and about 4 inches on the edging. I'm just pinning this in place now so I can move on to that wall. All right, I'll finish nailing that off later on. Okay, now's a good time to mention when you're putting on your top plate, your actual second plate on your wall on the top, you'll need to pull it back and forth to get it to line up. Just work your nails across from one side to the other and pull it as you need to make sure everything, the stud and the top plate, stays in line. This is what happens when you don't get straight lumber. Also, when you're nailing it together, don't just drive your nails straight down. Put one at an angle. And then finish off the next one the other direction. Again, turn the 2x4 as you have to make sure it stays in line. And just continue doing that along the line. About every 16 inches is fine. Okay, here's what the shed build looks like right now with the sheathing up on 3 walls and the wall with the door not being built yet. Okay, when you've got your last wall framed in, your doorway size the way you want it, mine's 36 inch, so I roughed it in at 38 by 82. Then, like the rest of the walls, I've got 2 boards screwed onto the studs that are holding this piece of 7/16 OSB in place. So when it's in place and I know I have it where I want it, I just take a pen or pencil and just scribe everywhere where it's going to be cut out. Then take the OSB down and cut it, put it back up, and you should have an exact fit. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video where I show you how to install the rafters and the roof sheathing.